We are headquartered in New York, but we have offices throughout the United States and actually around the world. And so we work in many different areas. We have business programs. We also have policy programs. You may see some of our talking heads on Fox or CNN talking about different things like trade with China. We also work in arts and culture, and then we have our education program, which is actually one of our largest programmatic areas. And our education work is actually focused in the United States and on global education. So despite the name Asia Society, we are actually really focused on global competence and helping students to really be prepared to work with anyone, but they don't necessarily connect that to STEM. So if you can show them how they can do global projects that can make a difference, they can connect those to careers and stay longer in these different career pathways. And on this one, I think we have a unique opportunity now with so many people working from home and being now very able to use Zoom and different online platforms to bring different speakers into the classroom or different people who can critique and connect with students directly, because it now just takes a quick Zoom call for 15 minutes rather than having to have someone drive and come, and it's a little bit easier to bring in that outside perspective into your projects in classrooms. So when we think about starting to create a project, a new project, and trying to bring in this local and global aspect and bring in student choice, we often start with asking students about local issues and what matters to them. So that can help you choose an authentic task, is working with your students to think about this. It could be something that they see every day on their way to school or just out in their community. If there's not something that comes to mind immediately, have them think about current events, looking at local news stories. What's happening? What are some topics that they could work on using their CTE or academic skills, of course aligned to the standards that you're teaching, but what are some topics that they could use their skills to make a difference on? You could also have them talk to civic or community leaders. So maybe it's somebody in the Kiwanis or Lions Club. Maybe it's somebody at the local hospital. Maybe it's somebody in the mayor's office or the local workforce development board or your advisory board. But having them talk to different people, and again, using online communication now has made that easier than ever, but helping students to really get a feel for what's going on in their local communities that they can impact. So what I wanted to have us do now is to think about some local issues or challenges that your community is facing. And go to this URL here. This is a Padlet. And then to start sharing some of those ideas on the Padlet. So the URL is here. So if you can go there, we'll be able to communicate through there too, I guess. Paula?
Okay, Miss Singmaster. Someone is wanting the resources, the link to the resources. Have you given that yet?
Yes, but I can, did you figure out the chat box?
I did, yes.
Okay. Let's see, I can go back to it for a second here.
Okay.
There, that is the, you can see the URL there. It's asiasociety.org/CTE toolkit.
Okay.
Okay. But right now, I'd love for everybody to go to the Padlet. So you can see the URL up here in the upper left-hand corner under the name. And all you do is you double-click on the Padlet and a box will show up, and then you can start typing. So just add in some of the local issues that your community is facing. And let's get some ideas going here. You can also click on this little pink circle on the bottom, and that will bring up a box for you so you can start typing. But share some ideas of local issues, things that students might be interested in working on, since we don't have any students with us today who can share. I'll give you a minute. Again, the URL is up here in the upper left-hand corner, this padlet.com/Singmaster, that's my last name, /TN for Tennessee. I see we have a hand raised. I don't know if I can, Terry, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to try to see if I can allow you to talk. I'm not sure. Terry?
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hi. I can't, I click on the little plus, I don't see a box pop up.
Oh, and if you double click on the page anywhere, does it something pop up?
Let me see if it's this one. If I double click. No, when I double click, it like goes back to like the small screen. Let's see.
Are you on a computer?
Oh, hold on. I'm on the laptop.
Hmm.
Okay, I see my name, but I don't like see a box in the middle.
If you scroll down, maybe it's getting subsumed by all the other ones. I don't know.
I don't know. Let's see.
That's odd.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just like, oh well.
I don't know. Usually you just, and you click down the little pink box in the bottom to the
Right.
circle. Yeah.
And then it should pop up in the middle, right?
It should, yeah, or on the bottom.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. Let's see. I don't see any faces on the side either. Am I supposed to see like anybody or?
No, I don't think so. Only me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I don't know
Okay.
about the box. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. At least I can hear everything.
Yes, that's good. All right. It looks like we're getting some good answers here. Lack of internet is a big one. I'm hoping that with the push toward online learning, we'll have more resources going toward that. It seems to me that internet should be a basic human right at this point. We all need it to live and work. Lots of issues about racial justice and diversity. Funding for schooling, yes, and pre-K, that's going to be a big one, I think, coming up too. Lots of state funding issues. Okay, so keep those coming into the Padlet. Hopefully you're able to access it. I'm going to switch back over to the presentation here for a minute. So once we have, let me go back to full screen here. So once we have our local issues, then we like to connect those to the global issue. And one way we like to do that, Asia Society, and this is increasingly popular across the US as well as across the globe, is through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the UN SDGs, these are a set of goals that the countries of the United Nations unanimously agreed to in 2015. And the idea is to solve these or meet these goals by 2030. Now you'll see here that these are large goals. They're not small in any way, shape, or form, but they're around ending poverty, ending hunger, having equal societies, looking at climate issues, both in the water and on land, responsible consumption and production. You can see them all here. You can also go to this URL on the screen, sustainabledevelopment.un.org/SDGs. And when you go to that URL, what you'll see, and let me just go there for a second and I'll show you. You can see the URL at the top here for those of you who are still going at the top there. You'll see all of the different goals. And for each goal, you can then click in for more information. And so what you'll find is, although these are very large goals, there are smaller targets and indicators underneath each one. And so these are more specific and focused. So when you're thinking about doing a project with students, you can think about maybe focusing on one of these targets instead, because it gets a little bit more specific and it's a little bit easier to grasp. Instead of no hunger, but maybe we can think about reducing half of the people who are living in poverty in our community, so that they have access to food, as a smaller target or goal. And so students are really excited about these goals. They're really interested in working on them. They really can see then how whatever issue you chose as your local issue, there's another country in the world that's working on it. And in fact, there are lots of different companies that are working on specific UN SDGs. There are cities or states that are working on very specific targets or SDGs. Different nonprofits are. So this is an easier way to grasp some of these global issues, is by looking at the UN SDGs. So what I'd like for you to do is to go look at the SDGs and the different numbers, and then go back to the Padlet, and for the local issue that you chose, go in and write a comment in there. You can write in the comment section underneath the post that you put on the Padlet, and add in which SDG aligns to that local issue. Because pretty much every issue that we face here in the United States is something somewhere else is also being tackled. And as we're thinking about how to frame these as part of projects with students, we can think about, can we learn from what another country or city has done already on this goal? It's not always about us saying that we have the answers, but what about what other people are doing? What are some of the things that they've come up with as solutions to these? So let me go back into the Padlet here. Oops. Let's see, Padlet. Okay. And then sometimes, reduced inequalities for access to different resources. This could also be about infrastructure too. So sometimes different issues can be under multiple SDGs. So that gives you some choice in what you're thinking about a topic. It can give students a different way of looking at different things. Yep, so for instance, mask or no mask, which is the huge debate right now, that could be under health and well-being. This one, vaping at school, would also be under health and well-being. So you can see how all of these different issues that we're facing are global issues that other places are trying to tackle the same exact thing. And so when we're thinking about having students do different types of projects, we can think about bringing in that global aspect. And it doesn't have to be about comparing a country to a country, but it could be about looking at some of these bigger issues. Even at the start of a project, if you're doing, for instance, an architecture and you're building a house, you could think about what are the different types of sustainable materials we could use, and how are these issues facing others around the world, and how are different types of sustainable buildings being built in different places. So that's just a way to help you start thinking about how to link some of these local issues with the global issues, and start bringing these topics into your classrooms. So keep going on the Padlet. Hopefully Padlet is something you're familiar with, and if not, it could be a good tool that you can use, especially as we're thinking about going back in maybe a hybrid form or all online form in the fall, depending on where you are and if you have figured that out yet. But this is a good tool that we like to use because you can do this anonymously, so you can get your students to do brainstorming activities online anonymously, so you can get everybody to participate. You can have them vote by doing the like buttons. So that's something that this is a good tool that's free that you can use. So let me go back here to my presentation. So next, I just want to share a couple of different examples from teachers across the country, and then I wanted to share some more free resources before we wrap up in 15 minutes. So this is Tara Barashek. She is an agriculture teacher in upstate New York. She knew when she first started teaching that she wanted to teach globally, but because she was a new teacher, she didn't want to completely overhaul her whole curriculum. So she started out with one project and added a global element to it. And that's always what we advise. Don't start by overhauling your entire curriculum or thinking you have to know everything there is to know about the world, but rather focus on one question in one project and start that way, or start really small with one globally focused project. So Tara started out with the cheeseburger project. She had her students think about where you get different components of a cheeseburger in different seasons. So they were in upstate New York. When they started thinking about getting their lettuce and tomatoes in the winter, it really helps students start thinking about their carbon footprint. And it got them to think about how could they advocate for more local agriculture. And they started an advocacy campaign to get people to go to their local farmers market. The next year, Tara decided to go even deeper, and so students were raising trout. And so she went online and she found a classroom in Ireland that was also raising trout. And so she had her students Skype with those students, and they started a conversation just about the different ways that they were raising their trout. One was ocean trout, one was river trout, the different sustainability and pollution issues that they were facing. And then the following year, she actually had students travel to Ireland so that they could talk in person. And so this has now grown to a large project where every year, at the beginning of the year, her students choose a sustainability issue. They choose a country to focus on, and then they study that issue and country, but they also plan a trip there. So the students have to write out the business plan. They have to go in front of the school board and get permission to go. They do all of the fundraising. And so then when they go on the trip, they learn about that sustainability issue firsthand. They do service learning. And so it's become what started as one very small project has grown to something that happens throughout the year and is a big focus of her work. And she said it's just had this huge, incredible impact on students as far as really opening them up to the world and also opening them up to all the different career pathways that exist within agriculture. This is an example from a teacher in Oregon, where I actually am. He was a manufacturing teacher and wanted to talk about the global supply chain. And so first he had students look at where things came from, their t-shirts, their backpacks, things in the room. He then had a guest speaker from Boeing come in and talk about their global production lines, where they get all of their different parts from producers around the globe, and then they bring them all to one place where they put together the airplanes. And so he knew a teacher in Alaska, and so they decided to work together to do this global simulation. So they had the students in Alaska design a set of gears and send those designs down to Oregon. The Oregon students actually produced them and then sent them back up to Alaska for assembly. So even though he didn't have an international partner, he was able to simulate this using the resources that he had domestically. Of course, it's not about just using international exchanges or travel, but you can do other types of projects too. So this is an example from a health class in Washington from Highline School District outside of Seattle, a very diverse district. She gives her students case studies to evaluate on different global topics. So it could be a disease, we know what that would be this year, policies of the World Health Organization, different global health issues or advocacy issues. Students then have to come up with a solution to that case study. They share it with their own class, then they have the opportunity to refine and change their minds and rework their solution, and then they present it to other classes and other peers. And so what she found in teaching this, and this was for freshmen, she said that not only does it help them think about the world outside of themselves, because as freshmen, they're pretty focused on themselves, of course. So it got them to think more about the world, but also it really opened them up to other careers that exist within health. It's not just nurses and doctors, but there are people doing advocacy, there are people doing policy, there are people doing research. And that really gets more students to then stay with the healthcare pathway. So those are some examples to help kind of inspire you as you think about how to start integrating some of these global topics into what you're doing. And then I wanted to also share the different tools and resources we've created to help you as well. So we've created online interactive professional development modules. They're all available completely for free. They're housed on ACTE's CTE Learn community, which is ctelearn.org, and I'll also have this on the next slide. These are primarily for CTE educators of grades 6 to 12, but we have had educators of grades 4 to 5. We've also had higher education people use these and found all the strategies and resources to be useful. And even if you're not teaching a CTE pathway, all of the strategies and resources can be useful to you. It's just that the examples throughout are very much focused on CTE and STEM, but you can extrapolate from there and use them. So these are the 10 newest modules that we just released the end of last year. The first one talks about what are these global skills, why are they important for the global economy. The second one is how do you make those local global connections, talking more in depth about the UN SDGs and how to work those into your projects. The third one is how do you really design your project? So if you're interested in continuing on this, I'd recommend that you start with that module. And then the fourth one is how do you assess these skills? And that helps you use those rubrics I shared earlier. There are 2 modules on student project management. If students are going to be successful at doing projects, they need to have those skills of budgeting and timeline and working with their teammates. So these 2 modules help you teach students those skills. There's one here that I'd recommend, the 7th one, on deep dive into global competence and respecting diversity. Many of you put for your local issue diversity and racial justice. This module will help you think about how to do some icebreaker activities at the beginning of the year, how to set those rules for your classroom for respectful conversation that can then carry throughout the rest of the year. So that's one I would recommend checking out before the school year starts. And then the 8th one here is how do you do those collaborative projects with schools in other countries? So if you're interested in doing something like Tara Barashek did, this module will walk you through how do you find a school, how do you find a teacher, and then how do you create a high quality project together and teach it together, both synchronously and asynchronously. There's one on CTSOs, which ones have a global focus in some of their competitions, or how could they be made global, and then how do you do global service learning for your CTSOs. So again, those are all free. I'll put this presentation on the conference website so you can copy all of these different URLs down. I'll do that as soon as we're done. And then just a couple other things I wanted to point out in the toolkit. We do have the very first option when you go to asiasociety.org/CTE toolkit and you go under the drop-down menu on the left here. That first one is classroom projects. When you go there, you'll see that we have sample projects organized by UN Sustainable Development Goal. And so we have one for each of the 17 goals, and they're all tied to different CTE pathways. So these are flexible, modifiable projects and lesson plans that you can just pick up and teach in your class if you want. Modify them. There are different extension activities for younger learners as well as older learners. Or you can use these as an inspiration to try to integrate this into what you're teaching already. So use them however works for you. We also, if you go under the section called Standards, Crosswalks, and Rubrics, We have taken the Common Career Technical Core, which is a set of common standards, and they may not match exactly what you're using in Tennessee, but you will see your standards reflected in there. And when you go here, this is kind of hard to read, but there are the standards on the left-hand side. You'll see those 4 domains of global competence, and we've aligned which ones you could be teaching for that standard. But most interestingly is in these last 2 columns are different topics you could be teaching that align to that standard that are global. And any links to lesson plans, articles, conversation starters. Everything you need to really get started if you can't think of anything are in these documents, and they're all aligned to your different pathways. So I highly recommend these as a place to get started, and ways, especially if you have specific standards that you're struggling to think about how they could be global, this is a good place to go. And then I think one of the last things I wanted to show you is there's also this section called CTE Career Pathways. And when you go there, you'll see that we've organized all the content in this toolkit by pathway. So if you're an ag teacher, you can go into this Ag, Food and Natural Resources, AFNR section. And when you go in there, you'll see the sample projects for ag. You'll see career profile videos linked to ag. You'll see those standards that are linked to ag. So for each of the 16 pathways, you'll see that there is a section for you with all of your resources. Oh, I did want to mention for that diversity module, in case you're interested in that, we also have a section of the toolkit that has different resources for you. It goes along with the module, but you can also just use these resources on your own without taking the module. And all those modules are only 10 to 15 minutes, so it's not a huge piece of your time to look at those, but there are different extension activities you can use with each one, so you can go deeper on any of those topics. And then last are just some career planning tools. When you go under this section, you'll see a set of videos of people talking about the global nature of their jobs. So you'll see that there's a business one, there's a Boeing engineer, there's for hospitality, there's somebody from Hilton, there's also a Top Chef contestant talking about culinary. So there's a lot of different videos there, both for students or for others, teachers, if you want to help make the case for why these skills are important for your career pathway. So that's all I have. There's, again, the URL for the toolkit. The modules are linked from there as well. Feel free to email me with any questions. I'm also very active on Twitter, so you can connect with me there. And then the keyword for this presentation is Pennsylvania. And Paula, I don't know if we had any Q&A or chat questions I can answer in the last minute.
No, I don't have any.
Okay. I know that the Q&A and chat functions didn't work well, so feel free to email me with any questions you have. I'm happy to send you any URLs or information, and I will post this PowerPoint as soon as we're done here on the conference website. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula, for being here.
Yes, very good presentation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.